Well, Levi, here we are, one
Here we
week
are.
away. By the time you watch this, 1 week away from provincial election here in BC. Advanced voting has started. In fact, after this podcast, I'm going to go to our local community center and vote in the advanced polls.
Bravo.
Yeah, if you can, do it. Get ahead of the lines.
Yeah.
Get it done. I have to do it for practical reasons.
Yeah. Well, if you do get it done sooner rather than later, parties will know and they will stop bugging you to go out and vote. So that's
Yes.
one of the practical things too.
This election, more than any, we're getting text messages left, right, and center from political parties
Okay.
and polling companies. Speaking of polling, we'll get to it in a bit, but polling's pretty much the same as it normally has been. This week, though, has been the week of the straws.
The
Eh?
battle of the
The
straws.
battle of the straws. Plastic straws versus cardboard straws versus.
Cardboard
I'm a
straws.
fan of these metal ones. Like, we've had these for quite a few years, and they work really well. They last forever, I think. Um,
Yeah, I'm just worried about the cleaning side of things.
Oh,
The
we got a
sanitary
special.
side.
We have a special tool to clean them out that works really good. I think some of us in our family keep them handy in our cars or in our purses, so that we can use them when we go to McDonald's. Because really, those cardboard straws were annoying.
Well, you do that, and I have like a big, massive box of plastic straws, so I keep some extra in my car, extra at home, in different
Oh, you
places like
managed to
that.
get a hold of some boxes of plastic straws.
Yeah,
Okay.
Amazon.
Okay. Anyway, we'll get to straws in a moment, but just a recap for if you're just joining us. My name is Mike Schutten. Work with ARP Canada along with my colleague Levi Minderhout. And in advance of the BC provincial election, Levi had this great idea that we should, hey, let's do a podcast every week, just touching on some of the different platforms of the parties, whether or not they're engaging on issues that ARPA Canada's often concerned about
Hmm.
and ARPA Canada engages with. We've done three podcasts. This is podcast number 4. We're hoping after this one to do one more next week, which I'm going to be on the road, so we're going to be doing that one from behind our screen, so it'll
Yep.
look a little bit different. And then we have I think we all have to go ahead to do it, right? To do one final recap
I think
podcast.
I'm hoping to do that.
Yeah. So after the election's on October 19th, and we hope to shoot another podcast on the 21st, Monday the 21st, just kind of giving a wrap up to this, but then also obviously we'll know the results of the election.
Yeah.
Although it's pretty close, so it might take a bit to figure this out. Definitely been pretty close. In the first episode, we sort of set the stage, talked about where things were at going into the election, what happened in the last election, how things had changed drastically on the political landscape in BC. In the second one, we gave some updates from the campaigns, touched on some of the candidates who were running, especially we highlighted some of the independent candidates who had come out of the BC United Party, which was no longer fielding candidates. And in the third one, we looked at the NDP and Green Party platforms. In each of those episodes, as well as in this one, we take numerous opportunities to encourage you to get involved during this election, whether that's volunteering for candidates, whether it's funding the candidates, whether it's going to all candidates' debates. Levi will share shortly his experience at one this past week. But this is an opportunity for us to be involved. So let's do so. Also using the material that ARPA Canada has provided, in particular the election guide
Hmm.
that's on our website. We don't have a printed copy with us today, but that election guide can be found at arpacanada.ca. Certainly helpful tool to give you some information so you can discern who to vote for. What are we going to hit up this week, Levi? What kind of things do you want to touch on?
Well, first, I want to just clear up one misunderstanding about voting and how to vote. Because I was even just talking to a colleague, and they were confused about, well, I haven't gotten anything in the mail, so am I eligible to vote? Like, they were waiting for this to come in, and I was like, maybe she couldn't vote. But just so everyone knows, like, any adult Canadian citizen has been resident here in British Columbia for a while is eligible to vote. Um, Sometimes you do need to register to vote technically because I know you might think otherwise, but the government and specifically Elections BC doesn't have all the information about you, so they don't have a list of in their back pocket of every single person who's eligible to vote or where they live. So they might not be able to contact you. So to vote, you're going to need to register. You can do that either online at Elections BC or when you go to cast your ballots, you can register right there. So that is part of it. Registration just helps you get more information about the election for Elections BC to send you some mail to remind you where to vote and specifically where your voting station is. So if you've never voted before, or if you've moved in the last 4 years, either won't have registration or that registration is out to date, so you will have to change that when you go to vote, or you can do that beforehand online. But just an encouragement that even if you haven't gotten anything in the mail from Elections BC or anything like that, still head to the polling station, still cast your vote. Turnout in the last few British Columbia elections has steadily gone down. It's like between 50 and 60% in the last few elections. But I'd love to see it to be like 100% in the Reform community in the Fraser Valley and across the province. So not that we can track that, but I would love to see that be 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't track that within our support base, but we can certainly track it after the election. It'll be interesting to see what ridings had the strongest showing as far as eligible voters going to the poll. That's really helpful information, though. So what you're saying, Levi, just so everybody's clear, is if you haven't received your voter's card, which I have, we haven't moved in the last 4 years. So because we voted in the last election, they just automatically send it here. So that's what we're going to take to the polling station. But if you haven't received that, I think by now it's probably too late to register ahead of time.
I think you can still go on to Elections BC and do your registration just show up there,
Okay. But even if you don't do that ahead of time, what you're saying is you can still show up at the polling station with 2 pieces of ID showing your current address, and you should be able to vote.
Yeah. And when in doubt, just bring extra ID along to polling station, and the wonderful attendants there will make sure that your ballot get cast.
Yeah, so really no excuses. Like anybody can show up, and as long as they have those pieces of information, they should be able to vote.
Yeah, especially for all young guys and girls. Like particularly like the demographic that votes the least often is younger people. So it'd be great again for younger people to go out and hit those ballot boxes. So if you're a younger person or your parents or grandparents of younger people, make sure you go encourage them to go out and vote as well.
Yeah, it's been a long time since
you were a younger person.
Eligible to vote, but I remember that the first time I was allowed to vote, it was like a big deal. Like all of a sudden, you're old enough to have a say in who's going to be your representative. So we have a 17-year-old, so we were already preparing him that maybe not this election, for sure not this election, but the next election, hopefully you'll be able to vote. So
and I have a sister who's actually attending school out of the country, and so we made sure that she ordered her ballots, or absentee ballots. It got mailed to her down in the States, and she can fill it out, send it back in, and so even though she's gone for the entirety of the election, she still gets to cast her ballot. So
good. Okay, so we touched on polling already. What are the polls looking like this week, Levi? Any significant changes? Still
neck and neck. Is basically a toss-up for who's going to win the election. I think last time we had talked about how the Conservatives were a bit more in the lead. That's changed in the last few days, last week or so. There's more polls, or basically an equal number of polls that put the Conservatives or the NDP ahead. So it's going to be a battle to the finish line here. I think the last projection I saw had the BC NDP winning a couple more seats just based on how their vote is distributed across the province. And so if we want a change in government, then we're going to have to go show up at the polls. Like we've been harping on the last couple of weeks, volunteer for candidates, donate to them, make a difference before it's too late.
Good. Okay, so we already set a little teaser out there earlier that, Levi, you had been to an all-candidates debate, but of course we want to, before we touch on that, talk about the leaders debate, the televised leaders debate. That happened this past week. So that was David Eby, the leader of the NDP, John Rustad, the leader of the BC Conservative Party, and Sonia Furstenau, the leader of the Green Party of BC. So the three of them were debating together, moderated by someone from Angus Reid. What was her name again?
Shashi Curl.
Shashi Curl. That's right. Anyway, what's your initial takeaway? We both watched it. Many of you probably watched it or at least read or heard something about it. But what did you think?
Yeah, so I mentioned last time on the last episode that the radio debate was a bit of a disappointment about how it would be great if there were more candidates that showed more godly character and fewer ad hominem attacks. I mean, it was better this time around on television. Like there was still some nasty banter back and forth, but it was better. I don't really think that anyone lost the debate or won the debate. It was pretty even keeled, all three, but I have a couple of thoughts from each of the candidates. It struck me, David Eby, in one point of the debate, he admitted that decriminalization and safe supply for drug policy wasn't working the way they were hoping, so they were changing tact on that. And that's the first time that I really remember, really register that he actually admitted that they were going the wrong direction there. So that was something new to me and a pretty big revelation.
I thought that was an interesting point it was a 90-minute debate, but it actually showed humility. I appreciated how he brought that across, conveying that, look, we thought this was the best thing we should do at the time, but now evidence has shown otherwise, so we need to find a new direction. I thought he showed humility there.
Yeah, and I think, not that this is the reason why you vote for someone or not, but from my perspective watching the debate and just my knowledge of the candidates anyways, it seems that David Eby is the most charismatic or the most interesting person to watch there. Like, he's very expressive, he talks well. John Rustad held his own for sure in terms of the message, but he's very stoic and just looks ahead of the camera and just gets his talking points across.
Yeah. He didn't strike me as very different. I've never met David Eby in person or the first time. Definitely met John Rustad. He didn't appear any different than he is in person when you would meet him. I think he's just trying to come across very statesmanlike. Like he's the one who's going to lead our province. The one thing I missed, though, was his ability to connect well with the audience in the sense of I don't know if he refused to or he just wasn't sure where to look, but he did not look at the camera.
No.
He continued to look at the other debaters or at the moderator.
Yeah, I had someone talk to me yesterday about that. It's like, why didn't you look at the camera?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but I felt he didn't connect as well as Eby and First.
Yeah, I'd agree. Though, what did come across loud and clear for him is that he connects with regular people all the time. He told a bunch of stories, including one story of him encountering a drug overdose on his way to the debate. So it could tell that he's really talking to regular people and the common folk and really trying to represent them well. So he did that well in a way that the other leaders didn't as much.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that because we were watching it upstairs on our computer in our main room. And so I was sitting there watching it and a few of my family members were walking around in and out. But at one point my wife walked in, she's like, oh, wow, he's telling another story. So she heard it a couple times throughout. She wasn't paying 100% attention, but she heard him telling stories. And we all know that stories are important, an important mechanism to convey a message. So.
And of course, Sonia First Snow, the leader of the Greens, is not really in a position where she is realistically going to be premier. So there isn't as much to comment on there. But I thought one of the interesting parts of the debate, or one of the comments she made that most struck me, is they were talking about Indigenous issues, and she basically just mentioned how John Rustad, and a little bit more, or this could apply to David Eby or other policy guys there, leaders there. She just mentioned how oftentimes we have such a limited imagination or vision about what can be done. So she was calling Rustad out on his limited imagination about how to deal with, to work with, to renew relationships with Indigenous peoples. And she was just kind of, and this has always kind of been the Greens' mantra. It's let's think beyond the box, beyond what's possible. Sometimes that's not realistic. But oftentimes it's very much refreshing because a lot of the policies that we deal with in politics are not easy to solve ones, and they require some creative out-of-the-box thinking. So that was one comment that struck out to me from her.
Yeah, I did think she presented very well, and I think she'd appreciate the straws we're using today too. One recyclable plastic straw and one metal straw. Cheers to the straws again. This is good.
Your plastic minty straw doesn't really work very well.
Yeah, they actually work best for smoothies. They're not the greatest for water, but
okay.
It's what we had.
And the reason why we're mentioning straws, we should actually.
Oh yes. Okay.
Is that last week, actually the week before, the day the NDP released their platform, BC Conservatives came out with a promise that they would repeal the ban on plastic straws and plastic cutlery. Basically meaning that, again, if they were in power, then restaurants, if they wanted, could give plastic straws once again. Yeah. So it's kind of a nod again to not a huge, hugely serious policy, but just one of those annoying little things that lots of people are like, we at least have plastic straws and nothing else in the province.
Yeah. The one observation I had during the debate, just kind of stepping back and looking at it, was I think it was at several junctures it became clear that there's a contrast in worldviews here for sure between John Rustad, I'll refer to him as small L liberal in this case, and Eby and Firstino, who are more progressive socialist, especially when it came to their solutions for things like housing and healthcare. We heard during the debate often Eby talking about the NDP's promising to build 300,000 homes. Sometimes I hear that over and over, and I think, how does the government actually do that? Like, how do they go build homes? Whereas Rustad was very clear, like, he didn't talk about building homes as much as he talked about putting infrastructure in place and getting red tape out of the way so that developers could build homes and people could move into those homes, etc. On healthcare, maybe it wasn't as stark, the contrast there, but yeah, clearly David Eby and Sonia Furstenau are very much, the universal healthcare system that Canada has is the only way to go, and there's no way that we can allow any private inclusion into that, the administration of healthcare. I don't know. Did you hear the same at all, or?
Yeah, for the most part, it was pretty obvious worldview clashes there, and that one party, or two parties actually, the NDP and Greens, just wanted bigger and more government, and Rustad and the Conservatives wanted less and smaller government, or in different ways. But just so all our viewers understand, you mentioned that Rustad and his Conservative Party was a small L liberal. Like, just so everyone understands what you mean there, what do you mean that they were small L liberal?
Yeah, more in the sense of like a classical approach to government, how government is there to administer justice, to provide the bigger things that we need as society to flourish, but then to step away and not be as involved in. And so this is specific to housing because that's where it really manifested for me. Not to get as involved in the actual constructing of homes and putting all kinds of programs in place for people to build homes and so on. I really think that their role in this is to put the bigger things in place so that we can build homes and live in them and flourish as families and communities.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification there.
Okay, so it's staying on the theme of debate here. You also attended an all candidates debate in your riding, so maybe share with our viewers how did that go? Did all the candidates show up? Was it more productive than the televised debate?
Yes and no at the same time.
Oh.
So I actually went to 1.5. I couldn't make the entire second one because I had to dart out for a hockey game.
Okay.
So good.
Priorities.
Good excuse.
Yeah.
So the first debate, there was all three candidates that were running: NDP candidate, Conservative candidate, and an independent candidate.
Okay.
And that was there wasn't as much substantial disagreement there. And so it was less interesting from a policy perspective, but it was really interesting just to get to know the character of the candidates, and particularly the independent candidates that are running. It's a good way, again, policy kind of aside, to know what type of person is running, whether they're competent or not, whether they're actually going to be good as an MLA if they get elected, and what are some of the things that matter to them. The second debate, the independent and the NDP candidate showed up. The Conservative one did not, so it was kind of not as much of a full debate as I was hoping. But again, it was a good opportunity to actually see the actual people running for office, which I think is, again, really important to know them as individual people and candidates, what moves them, what they're passionate about, what they're good at, what they are not good at, and just help you get to know them as individual.
Okay, good. Well, if you do have an opportunity yet to attend an all candidates debate, I'm not sure if there's any still happening in this last week, but if you do, there are a good opportunity to see where the candidates stand. As we said at the top, last time we touched on the platforms of the BC NDP and the BC Greens. Today we want to touch on the Conservatives platform, except they haven't really released an entire platform. Granted, there are a lot of things we do know based on press releases that they've put out, different statements that John Rustad has made throughout this campaign and prior to the campaign. Maybe, Levi, touch on some of the key things that might relate to our viewers, things of maybe interest when it comes to the economy and the infrastructure, things we talked about, but also things that might be squarely in the realm of the issues ARPA Canada deals with.
Yeah. So some highlights of the policy plans they put out. Again, they haven't released a whole comprehensive 60 or 80 page platform like the other two parties have. But what they have said so far, some things that you've probably heard about already. We talked about they want to end safe supply and drug decriminalization and support involuntary or mandatory recovery programs. They also want to tackle a lot more crime and criminal activity, making it harder to get out on bail, to have longer minimum sentences for violent offenders and faster trials so that justice happens faster. We already mentioned the ban on plastic straws and cutlery. They want to end that.
Sweet.
And then they also made some infrastructure announcements that they want to do a lot more building infrastructure across the province. Things like expanding the highway all the way through Chilliwack in the Fraser Valley, replacing some key bridges and tunnels like the Massey Tunnel or the Ironworkers Memorial Bridge in Vancouver area, or the Taylor Bridge that I drove on for the first time going to Fort St. John last year. They want to replace that one. And even a new bridge, a second bridge over Okanagan Lake between West Kelowna and mainland Kelowna, regular Kelowna, the city of Kelowna.
Yep, yeah, I know that, between kind of like West Bank and Kelowna. Yep.
They want to get rid of the ICBC monopoly and make sure that private insurers can get involved there. John Rustad in the debate especially focused on economic reconciliation with First Nations, so less of a cultural reconciliation, or I just say I'm sorry, but like, let's make reconciliation be based on let's empower you to get involved in getting more jobs and be in natural resource projects. He's talked about how the BC NDP deficit was so bad, it's almost $9 billion this year. So he's like, I want to balance the budget, but it's going to take me basically 2 mandates or about 8 years to get that done. So if balanced budgets are something that matters for you, the BC conservatives do want to get there. They're just going to say it's going to take a while. And they said they would have a referendum on any new proposals to increase taxes. And basically, no people want to increase taxes, so that's probably a guarantee. They're not going to increase taxes really at all during their time in government.
That's a term we haven't heard much lately. BC referendum on something. It's not common practice anymore that governments would actually resort to a referendum.
Yeah. Well, usually when they do referendums or things like that, they fail. Like, wasn't the last referendum, they did one in 2018 or 2019 about electoral reform. The BC NDP did that because they had promised the Greens that in order to get some of their supply and confidence votes in the legislature that they would have a referendum on electoral reform. And that was soundly defeated again. So
yeah. Okay, and then I see a list in the list that you provided. There is one or two that really connect well to the work that we're doing as ARPA Canada. So one touches on caregivers for family members who are in need of care, and how that would relate to any kind of tax credits and so on. Have you looked into that one at all, Levi, as far as how it connects with our elder care policy report?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the BC Conservative platform is relatively weak, so there's not a lot of details. But basically, the gist of what they're hoping to do is that if you have someone in your family, whether a disabled child or, for instance, an elderly parent, for example, and you provide care for them on a regular basis, that they might provide some increased tax benefits to help it make you financially get by not working in the paid workforce, but like working in the non-paid workforce to care for people. So they're trying to do a little bit more of that, and that's something we encouraged governments to do in our elder care policy report. And another policy that's in that elder care report, they didn't pick it up from us, I'm sure, but they said they would do is to help people age at home more. There's better quality of life if seniors can stay in their own homes rather than go to a hospice or a hospital to spend their last days. So they promised some more money to help people renovate their homes so that people could stay in their homes longer. And they also promised to get rid of like daily charges to stay at palliative care facilities or hospice care facilities to kind of encourage and incentivize and make it easier for people to access hospices and palliative care, something that we've talked a lot about at ARPA and with our Care Not Kill campaign. Yeah. So those are some things that they mentioned in the platform that kind of directly relate to our work. But on the whole, the things that they've announced and talked about in their platform commitments are kind of bread and butter, big things that matter to kind of like everyone. They haven't really focused on a little bit more of the niche policy topics that we deal with specifically at ARPA.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, we're coming to the end of this podcast, the fourth podcast. Again, we do want to conclude by encouraging you to get involved in this election. Certainly, as we get closer to October 19th, be sure to vote. If you're not sure where to vote, Levi did touch on that. Go to electionsbc.ca, find out where you can vote. Make sure if you don't have your registration form that you would have come in the mail, you take 2 pieces of ID along showing your current address. But also find opportunities to assist candidates. Levi and I will know the term GOTV, Get Out the Vote. That's an acronym for Get Out the Vote. And as we get towards October 19th, that becomes actually the most crucial point in the election, where parties and candidates, as they've assembled supporters throughout their ridings, want to make sure that those supporters get to the polling stations and vote. So there's ample opportunity to still do that as the campaign comes to a conclusion on October 19th.
And those are the days, election day is when they need the most number of volunteers. And it's a Saturday. So to get that vote out, they require all sorts of volunteers to man phones, to knock on people's doors, to leave information cards about where to vote. So yeah, if you haven't had time to volunteer yet for a campaign, that election day would be the time to do it.
Absolutely. And remember that advanced polls are open. Today's the first day they're open. I'm going to be going to vote soon, and
who are you going to vote for, Mike?
Yeah, that's something that I think is I think that's really neat about elections, that you can actually just do that on your own. You go there, you stand in secret, if you will, in the voter's box and get to cast your ballot. I have done definitely some research into the candidates that are here. I know the incumbent, and I've got my mind made up, and we'll see what the result is on October 19th.
We'll see what the result is on October 19th. Hopefully you know a definitive result. They should be able to count the ballots pretty quickly that are there, but if there are any, all the ballots have to be in by the end of the day, October 19th. So they're not going to wait longer to get more ballots in and to count them later. So we should know the results, but sometimes if they're very close ones, then they do a final round of counting for close races a little bit after that. But hopefully we'll know who the next government is, who the next premier is, or if it's the same premier, by the end of next Saturday.
Good. Well, thanks a lot again, Levi. And thank you all for watching. Episode number 5, God willing, will come next week. And then we have one concluding episode. Hopefully that happens on Monday, October 21st.
And if you have any questions you want us to answer in the final episode before the results come out, send them our way. Send them into levi@arpacanada.ca, and we'd love to answer some of those ones on the podcast and clear up any miscommunications or any things that you're wondering about.
Excellent. All right. Take care.
Bye, everyone.